Hello again, welcome to another Toku Ramblings. Today we have the end of an era for Ultraman. The end of the mid-2000s, late 90s era. Started with Tiga, though technically there were a couple of breaks here and there, with Ultraman Mebius. The initially fought last hurrah for the franchise after years of struggling. That didn't end up happening because the company got sold and was safe. Though technically the financial woes probably wouldn't end until 2014. So this came out at about the 40th anniversary for Ultraman. Man, I think 40th? Yes, I think that's right. So this is obviously a big celebration for like the Showa era. That is very much it. Technically there was more shows at this is entirely the Showa era celebration, which takes place 25 years after the end of AD, who was the last Ultra to defend the Earth of the M78 Nebula. And peace has reigned on the planet since, until kaijus begin to appear once more, with the first one to show up on the planet wiping out the newest defense team, the Guards for Utility Situation, or GUYS, leaving only one member alive, in this case Ryu Aihara. At the same time, the Father of the Ultras has sent rookie Ultraman Mebius to guard the planet and discover what it means to be an Ultraman. Taking on the human guys of Mirai Hibino, he joins Guy alongside the surviving member Ryu Aihara and new Captain Shingo Sakumizu, alongside a ragtag misfit group of civilians that Mirai had run into on his first day there. Football or soccer star George Ikaruga, motorcycle road racer Marina Kazama, medical student and kaiju otaku Teppei Kuze, and preschool teacher Konomi Miyamagai. But Mirai's not the only Ultra on the planet. Daz never takes on the former GUYS Captain Serizara, and goes by the name of Hunter Knight Tsurugi, and has a bone to pick with the initial wave of kaijus. So maybe it's sort of split into three portions. There's the initial portion focused around Bogal, this snake-like kaiju devouring all life form on numerous planets. That's the sort of middle portion that's mostly focused on singular episodes focused around each character and a wide variety of Showa Ultras. And then the final arc dealing with the Dark Four Heavenly Kings and their leader Impera. And yes, this is very much in a similar vein to Go Kaiju, though it's mostly focused in on the Showa era, so there's no mentions of Tiga, Dyna, Gaia, or Cosmos, or Max, or Nexus. This is entirely focused on the Showa era. Are you going to get more out of this show if you watch all of them? Yes, obviously I have not gone into that either, but is the show still enjoyable on its own? Yes, very much so. This is still a very incredible show, even without the knowledge of the past. It does help to make it more enjoyable, but what this show does have that I think helps to stand out against a lot of other Ultras is I think one of the best teams this franchise has ever put together. There is no member that feels like the forgotten one or the least developed. Everyone here feels like they are important to this. Well, they get a moment to contribute, like not just one, but multiple moments. And let's start with the main Ultra. What I like is that we get to see, like, with Mirai, that he has a lot to go. Because, that first battle, the big epic one is kind of undermined by the end when most of the city has also been destroyed. Or when Ryu was, rightfully yelling at him that there's not much left that has to be rebuilt. So, it gives, an arc that he has to go through to become the warrior that lives up to the past, and we see that in episodes of all, like with Femstar, where he he takes what more or less he hears Ryo complaining about to heart to be a better fighter and better working with them. I also just like his personality. Like, he's naive and kind of happy-go-lucky, but not in that annoying kind of like, you're an idiot, but more just, you don't understand Earth culture. And technically, yes, this season is a lot more lighthearted tonally. Like, it's not as dark as Nexus by a country mile, but it still goes to some shocking places. Like that last arc really puts him through the ringer. Not like the biggest ringer, but just like, you feel bad. You want to give him a hug, especially when Mebius turns everyone against him to the point that his friends are pointing a gun at him, and he's crying about just how much this is doing to him mentally. Like everything he goes through in that last arc is surprisingly dark for how late the season had been up to that point. And like everything else, even the other Four Kings put him through is just as bad. Not as bad as what the last one does, but shocking to a point. Ryu, I feel, makes a very great counterbalance to Mirai's naive and optimistic outlook on life. He's a lot more the broody, dark boy, considering the fact that, he's the singular survivor of the initial guys. Dude, that is a lot to deal with. But despite being the only formally trained soldier on the one with the most experience, he's still willing to go for some risky moves when the push comes to shove. And I like the interactions that he shares with Hikari, considering that, he's in his former captain's body and really wants to defend him. I liked him a lot. He did butt heads with the team a lot, but it was very clearly it came from the experience rather than more or less him just being smug. Unlike George, who did definitely start off as sort of like the arrogant lone wolf who really didn't want to be there to the point in his first Focus episode he's willing to quit it until Mirai is able to hit back, is able to block one of his shots. They're sort of going for a lighter guy. I really can't say that because Guy was really not a team player for most of the season. He was. It was not until more or less he had to come to accept that, okay, I care about most of you. Here, it also just comes that he tries to be a ladies' man and just strikes out every time. It is astounding how badly he is. He does romance. Alright, so a lot of his focused episodes are just around needing to accept the help of a team, which he has not really done for most of his career because he thought he was good enough to go manage on his own. I really liked that, especially when he's forced to face the actions of it, when he takes the new super weapon they've been developing and nearly fumbles it because it's not how it initially works. I do like how they explain his weird quirk regarding the ocean that technically comes up once, but it's nice. It's a lot better than Marina, who's afraid of spiders. That just kind of is a thing because, she's a girl, she needs to be afraid of some kind of bug. I can show that she's actually that she has her cute moments. But I did like her as sort of the big sister action girl who sort of is also able to hear really well. That's sort of the thing. In the first episode where they're all together, they're kind of all shown to have, that thing that they're able to do. George sort of becomes a sharpshooter. She obviously does the vehicles, but she also can sense monsters. I kind of like that she's a lot cooler in the moment compared to as sort of the big, the two main people who are willing to get into it. I like the big highlights for her when she confronts Chronorm in the past, I think, or when she like chooses to ran out a bite as bait for like a really solid action scene. I really liked her too. Like, can you tell I like most of this cast? Now we get to another guy comparison in the form of Teppei. Hey, fanboy of all things Kai. He's sort of meant to be that person who explains all the older kaijus, to the younger audiences who have not seen the show. Which I like. It's a nice way of easing newer fans in and not having them have to look up wikis and or like ask fans if they have seen it. And I like, between his episode dealing with his overbearing family who wanted to take over who wants to take over the family clinic. And again, even when he stands up to Mirai to protect the sister of a friend, as it shows that he's technically more of the science, uses his brain more. He's willing to take risk when it needs to be. And now we have the more standard cute girl of the team quota in the form of Konami. She's also sort of the monster controller of the group that I make use of. Specifically, the main one was sort of Miklos, that she sort of became the mother to in regards to it. And then there was also Ella King, but I like that she had the most. It definitely felt like she had the most growth of confidence. It wasn't a story specifically, but like you could feel her confidence growing as early as like the 4th episode when she blows off Kelbeam's horns. Or when Ultra 7 teaches her near the end about like courage of standing up for herself, where she sort of is the main focus of like the second in Dark Emperor saga episode. So where she needs to help free Mebius. Yes, I really like that. Again, no one here feels like they're the odd guy out or the least focused upon. Everyone here feels like they are important to this team in some form or another. And it's held together by a really good mentor and captain figure in Sakamizu. Not just because he has that mentor in the time when they need it actually in caring about the team, but I just like the story surrounding him, and that despite looking 40, he's a lot older and actually the leader of the organization guys associated with, and just wants to stand by an Ultraman's side, in this case Mebius, after being so close to one. It's such a cool tidbit and more or less really makes him a cool mentor. Aside from the main team, 4 guys, there's the comedic duo of the adjunct Toriyama, and his secretary Maru. Sort of the pointy-hair boss and his yes-man who is mostly there to rein in his ego that no one on the team really respects except Mirai because he's Mirai. Right, he obviously gets his comeuppance here and there when things are not going his way. The deputy chief does act more like the real chief for most of the season until it's revealed that Sakamizu is the actual chief. We obviously get to the other main Ultra and Hikari, who basically has a more prominent story role early on when he's like Hunter Knight Tsurugi, who's bent on avenging the planet that he was researching that ended up being destroyed by Bogle. And very much kind of sort of mirrors how Mirai initially was in his first battle, uncaring about the collateral he causes as long as he gets his vengeance, which does serve as a good initial point of growth as Mirai tells him that it's not okay to just allow things to be destroyed. Obviously once Bogle dies, his part in the story is mostly finished, besides coming back for one episode where he deals with a clone, and then the finale where he passes his powers on to Ryu. So it's not like he's a secondary, and more than just he's a character who needs help and has a part in the story for the initial portion of it, which I feel is a little disappointing. It's probably the one missed opportunity I think the show has, since a lot of his story stuff besides like the initial arc is handled in his little mini saga they have. And speaking of Ultras, almost all of the original Showa era Ultras show up in some form. So throughout the season. Though, unlike Gokaiger, which was just kind of filled with cameos from the past, they more have it near the end, with them, like, teaching him or the characters a lesson. Now, obviously, I feel like Gokaiger was able to get around it by the fact that the main 6 Rangers had enough personality and such stage presence that they didn't need it. But I like how in this show, a lot of it is saved for the end of the season. We're giving the tributes. And by extension, they serve as the episodes that they do focus in on really feel like they could have come out of that specific season in what they and again, it gives time for, like, the characters to have time to develop as characters before getting to the fan service. I'm not saying that Gokaiger did it worse just because it's entirely focused on the fan service. That was just a case of a crisis causing more cameos to happen than they were originally intending to have. Moving on to villains, sort of the main threat early on is Bogle, the snake-like kaiju that devours life on all planets from planets before they arrived on Earth, and the main catalyst for Hunter Knight Tsurugi's, like, anti-hero, almost anti-villain, not anti-villain, but just, like, lack of care for any. She does a good job as, like, a first arc villain. She doesn't really talk much, she's more just this threat that scares other kaijus, which should tell you she's not really bad news. She definitely feels more like a villain for Tsurugi rather than Mebius, which kind of, again, makes it feel like the show was more Tsurugi's show, but it still shows Mebius growing as a warrior and teaching the lessons that he has gotten up to that point. After that, it's sort of Kaiju of the Week format for a good chunk of its run. Featuring a lot of returning Showa writers like Bemstar, Birdon, Twin Tail, but it does take time to introduce new brands of aliens here and there. The Phantom aliens, which notably its most notable member appeared in X, makes their first appearance here. And there are some other great monster designs that show that they are still able to make solid kaiju designs despite being at, potentially the end of their run. Obviously, things change once Yapul is resurrected midpoint, and sort of gives a recurring antagonist in the form of the Dark Heavenly. And I like them as, like, this sort of penultimate foe they face, and it kind of does show a good amount of mixing old and new. Obviously, you have the old in the form of Yapul and Mephiles, and then you have the new in Death Ram and Growth. Though, at the end of the day, they're still kind of just monsters of the week. Yapul at least does kind of stand out a little more since he is sending kaijus, but he ends up being the first king to go. But it does show that him being the first one does show that this is not going to be as easy as previous fights. This is going to be a very hard fight for them to win. And there is something sort of final feeling about Alien Impera. Like this anti-Ultraman who favors darkness over light. Regal but cruel and sadistic. Like, even though he only really appears near the end of the show, like, it really gives a near hopeless scenario with no chance of victory that fills, like, a lot of episodes. It does legitimately feel like a very hopeless final episode. So, until we follow the traditions of anime of using the power of friendship to defeat Satan. Who, is one of those Satans that does take losing surprisingly well, which I do think is kind of interesting. Though, ironically, the biggest monster of the show is not some kaiju or monster, like, even considering Bogal just eats things, the worst monster ends up being a bloody journalist. Like, this guy, Mitsuhiko, just stands out for just how unbelievably horrible he is. I mean, just look at that face. Look at that face. don't you just want to punch that unscrupulous, careless, heartless jerk-off right in the face? Like, he only appears for a couple of episodes, but, like, man, he leaves such a mark between ousting Mebius and just being the worst kind of journalist. And he doesn't even get his comeuppance. But it's like, that's one of the weird things, is just like, maybe it's trying to be realistic of just, like, sometimes bad people get away, but just, like, for a series that's supposed to be as hopeful as it is, it's so weird that they just let him get away with what he does without some kind of aesthetically, I feel like this does feel like it's trying to, like, obviously, sort of, I felt like Max also was trying to be a more, like, so, like, Nexus clearly was trying to be a very departure from a lot of the show eras. You know, they're all wearing black and very combat-esque gear. Obviously, Dax and this do try to update the Showa era design. Well, I got it. But maybe this does feel like it could have been brought up in the, like, obviously the music features returning art. The main theme is done by a returning artist from the original era, and feels like it could have come out of that era. And the main suit feels like a perfect update of classic Ultras. I like the red as more of a side thing. Like, he's still growing, and, like, the red kind of feels like it's adding to a power. Showing his maturity as an Ultra. And, like, I also like that for Hikari, who goes from, like, the more evil-looking Tsurugi to the more stock standard sort of blue Ultra. And, like, that is the best way to describe this series. Again, it's a classic early era modernized between the return of classic villains with new designs. The soundtrack feels ripped right from that era. Well, it's like they never missed the beat, even after Nexus attempted to be a more grounded look. It just comes down to he was wanting to do with the show, and, like, you know, I could more or less list off all the episodes that are really great. You know, nothing here feels like filler. Or, like, there's Leo's tribute episode, 80's tribute episode is also really great, and, like, feels like it caps off, like, the school stuff, Yapul's resurrection. Like, Ultraman is such an easier, like, tokusatsu to find compared to, like, Sentai. But, like, almost the entire series is available. Like, even if you haven't watched the classics, like, this is still a show I would highly recommend watching. I like the aesthetics. I like this cast very, very much. It feels like an almost perfect show. I kind of prefer X as my favorite Ultra still. Not just because it was, like, the first one. But just because I can't really say. I feel like more or less it was much more tighter and, like, obviously I don't think there was much filler, but you could say it might go on for a little longer than it needs to. But maybe I'll decide later that I like this one a bit better. But, like, if this was meant to be the last one, this was a great one to go out on. Though we're not done yet because we still have movies and specials. Yeah.